because I was the CEO that put profits above everything else. But when the bottom line is all that matters, when that's the focus, it eventually catches up to you. Maybe it's not on a New York sidewalk or with a bullet, but it will catch up. And the entire time, you'll be so confused, scratching your head, wondering why so many people hate you. Who wants to feel like their worst misfortunes are funding someone else's Lamborghini? If there's one group of people more universally hated than politicians or lawyers, or maybe influencers turned boxers, it's corporate executives. And here's an example. Brian Thompson, CEO of United Healthcare, he was killed right out in the open, right on a public sidewalk. The initial response, it wasn't shock, it wasn't horror, it wasn't, how could this have happened? It was actually quite the opposite. People were out celebrating as if their favorite sports team had just won the Super Bowl. These are people who normally spend all day arguing with one another. They're standing together now briefly in solidarity. People are furious with CEOs, but why? Is it just because they make a lot of money? Or is there more to it? Let's break it down. Hey, I'm Vince Covino. I've started, ran, built, and even sold, even tanked my fair share of companies over my career. And as a national CEO of a big company, I know very well the feeling of being a target of public outrage. I've received more than a few death threats, and a lot of people were very unhappy with me. Maybe they still are. And after a lot of introspection, honestly, I get it. I understand where they're coming from, because I was the CEO that put profits above everything else. But we'll get to me in a minute. First, let's talk numbers. CEOs make a lot of money. No big surprise there, but how much money? I want to put this into perspective here. CEOs are paid 344 times more than the typical worker. Yeah, that's a lot of money, but here's the thing. That's not why CEOs are hated. It's not just because they make a lot of money. I mean, that may be a big part of it, but it's not all of it. The real anger, it comes from how CEOs make their money. It's when it's at the expense of others, particularly when they're profiting from people's pain. So for example, Brian Thompson was in the healthcare industry, right? They make huge profits, they have happy investors. And yet there are countless stories of unjustified, denied claims, financial ruin, medical bankruptcies. It is soul-crushing to entire families. But it gets worse. People die, untimely deaths, every single year because of their battle with insurance companies. By the way, the happy investors, they're only happy for now. If these CEOs can't squeeze out even more profit next quarter, if they can't beat earnings in the next quarter, the next report, the reality is those happy investors are going to be very unhappy very fast. Plus, here's the reality. CEOs are just one part of a system that's seemingly at odds with the common man. We could lay just as much blame on boards of directors, just as much blame on shareholders. Okay, so that may sound like I'm defending CEOs, and I'm not. I'm just saying there are a lot of layers here. But if there are so many layers, why are CEOs taking so much of the heat? I think there's a couple of reasons. First, it's personal. Let's get back to Mr. Thompson. So he's the CEO of this huge health insurance company. And if you were to poll the whole country on health insurance, you're not going to get very many 5-star ratings. What you're going to find is frustration and confusion. Being told something's covered, finding out the hard way it's not covered. Being taken by an ambulance to a hospital, you're unconscious, but maybe that hospital's not in your network. Or the insurance company drops coverage, and it's something that you need to be healthy, to think, to feel better, to stay alive. It's more than frustrating, it's deadly. People's lives are at stake. So yeah, they're gonna take it personally. Who wants to feel like their worst misfortunes are funding someone else's Lamborghini? Now, I know I'm harping on healthcare here because that's obviously the lead story, but this spans the entire economy. That's first. Second, the CEO is more than just a person. They're more like a mascot. But instead of representing like a sports team, they represent a system. And that system, it takes more and more, and it gives less and less. That leads me to my third point, and that is people are tired, people are hurt, They feel stepped on. They feel invisible. They feel insignificant. We can argue all day about what to do or what not to do about wealth inequality, but we can't argue that it doesn't exist. Just a handful of people in the United States have more wealth than the entire bottom half of the country combined. Meanwhile, millions of Americans can't make ends meet. They're stuck in jobs with no upward mobility. They're in a labor market that is continually being automated. It's being outsourced in the name of efficiency. They're begging for cost of living raises, and you know what, these normally don't even keep up with inflation. And it's all on this promise that if they work hard, good things will happen. Well, guess what? They're fulfilling their end of that bargain. But what they're seeing is good things happen to people who are much higher on the corporate food chain. And so the worst part is if you're a CEO, you probably don't see the problem with any of this. I can hear my inner CEO voice. I can hear it saying, that's how the game's played. You gotta break a few eggs. I can practically hear some of you screaming, business isn't about making friends, it's about making money. Not anymore. Those days are numbered. And here's why. Profit and people don't have to be mutually exclusive. It's possible to create something that transcends the bottom line without breaking it. It's something that lasts. It's something that has power to withstand your next quarterly earnings report. But when the bottom line is all that matters, when that's the focus, it eventually catches up to you. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not during the next quarter, maybe not for years. And maybe it doesn't happen in broad daylight. Maybe it's not on a New York sidewalk or with a bullet, but it will catch up. And the entire time, you'll be so confused, scratching your head, wondering why so many people hate you. You know, up until a few years ago, I was that CEO. I founded and built a zoo and aquarium company that had expanded across the country. We had millions of guests and tens of millions in annual revenue. This to me was the textbook definition of success. But the reality is I put profits above people, above the animals, above everything, and it's hard to publicly admit that. I thought being a great businessman was measured by efficiency and by scaling and by the bottom line. Instead of asking myself, what's the honorable thing to do here? I'd ask, what's the minimum the law requires me to do? How do I make more money at this? So over time, I think I stopped thinking of them as living, breathing beings, but as assets on a spreadsheet. I didn't intend for that. It just sort of happened. So you can see where this is going and why a lot of people hate me. And now I understand. I didn't understand before. The truth is they didn't hate me because I was making money. They hated me because of how I was making money. And when that finally clicked, it set me on a journey that revealed decades of ego and greed. It allowed me to see as I'm seen and to know as I'm known. The reason I'm telling you this is because I'm proof. Capitalism can evolve and it can lift everyone. I believe it's actually happening right now in many companies. I think there are a lot of leaders out there whose hearts and minds are becoming strongly connected. But it takes work, and it's a paradigm shift. Purpose-led capitalism in leadership. It pays dividends in ways and in dimensions we almost can't imagine. Thanks for watching, and always remember, lead closer to the heart. We'll see you next time.